Hi everyone, I'm Michael Holian, and I'll be spending some time today with you talking about how to present at webinars. I'm a Toastmaster, and I've been doing a lot of Toastmasters work for the District 3, state of Arizona. I've had a lot of opportunities to speak in front of large groups, both live and on camera. So I'm going to share some of those different learnings I've had with you, and we'll have a specific focus on webinars and how you present when you're on a Zoom type of conferencing. But we will talk today about the conferencing platform and how to set up for success there. Some tips on great ways to do presentations, and then we'll talk about your speaking skills and how you speak in public. So let's talk about the webinar itself. My first piece of advice for you is, if you can at all, you should try to get some help. Ask someone to co-host with you. If you can set them up as a co-host, do so if your account allows that. If not, if you can only have one host, then have them host and show the slideshow presentation while you speak. In addition to them running whatever slideshow you have or managing you on camera, what they can also do is they'll see the incoming questions that people have. If you ask a question with asking for a raise of hands or some sort of response from the audience, they'll be able to see that come through and they can report that to you. If a question needs to be answered, they'll raise their hand to you and interrupt, and you can say, okay, Bob, what is it? And Bob would tell you, we have a question from the audience about this, and you would answer. But one of the most valuable things they'll do for you is they'll see whoever's making noise on that Zoom call. Because you'll have a bunch of people in there, and some of them will have uncontrollable noises that come from the dog barking, people in other rooms, people in the same room 5 feet away because they couldn't get far enough from them for their call. And just the people who have a lot of feedback in their sound system. Sometimes people run things on the speaker and their telephone at the same time, so they're talking and you hear these sounds just echoing and reverberating. And the host of the meeting will see that that's the individual who's making noise and be able to mute them right there. If that's you, it's going to take away time from you presenting. And we're going to talk about you presenting should be the focus of what you're doing. Your message is the most important thing. Let your co-host focus on managing the disturbances in the meeting. My next point for you is the internet. If you can manage at all to have a wired internet connection where you've got the cable running from the wall into your computer, do that. That's going to give you the best internet signal possible in your household, and what you have going out to the Zoom servers or the web conferencing servers is very important. And so you having a good signal strength for that is great. But if you have to use a wireless signal, just a couple tips. First of all, be as close as possible to your wireless router. Okay, my setup here has me about 3 feet from the wireless router. So that would give me the best possible signal that I could think of. But the other important things about that, once you're close, is to make sure that no one else on that same wireless internet is using up air traffic. Meaning they shouldn't be streaming movies. They shouldn't be playing video games across a wireless connection. In fact, my son is right above me upstairs, and he uses gaming all the time. If I do something like this and I'm on a wireless, I would make him stop while I conducted this session, right? And then your phone uses your wireless connection. And I say turn off your wireless, but what I really want you to do is turn off your phone completely, because you don't need this device distracting you during your presentation. Just turn your phone off. Make sure your co-host has their Wi-Fi turned off as well. Next, we're going to talk about appearance. There's a couple different things about appearance. We'll start with how you appear on camera by talking about the camera itself. I've got two cameras in this setup, the one on my laptop and that camera is okay, but if I was using it, it wouldn't really give me a lot of flexibility as far as how I move and things like that. I'd have to move the whole computer to move the camera. So I went out and purchased a webcam. It was relatively inexpensive on Amazon, about $30, and that webcam is high definition. It can be moved. I can position it in a lot of different places. It's still connected by a wire, but I can have probably 10 feet of range where I could choose to put that webcam, and gives me a lot more capability and flexibility than the built-in camera on my laptop. And so if you think you're going to be using web conferencing a lot, I would say look around for a moderately priced but reliable webcam. Now, one of the things captured in the web camera is you, but the other thing that's captured is what's behind you. And as you speak for a while, be assured that people will be looking at everything that's behind you. So a couple of tips here. Remove clutter. First of all, remove any clutter that's there. Don't give them anything to look at that can distract them, see what books you're reading or anything like that. What I've done is I've put a couple of my Toastmasters plaques and trophies up above me. I did that on purpose. They normally sit over there, but the reason they're there right now is to help establish a little bit of credibility. It's just a visual credibility that you see. If you look at the TV broadcasts that the commentators have when they're shooting from home, the weatherman, things like that, they always have their trophies and plaques behind them when they're shooting, so you can look and go, ooh, this person really is a good weatherman. So if you can at all, establish your credibility with items behind you, or at least a clean appearance. Now, if that's not going to be an option for you, if just your setup doesn't allow you to have a good one, you might choose a virtual background. A virtual background is a tool in Zoom, in Teams, and WebEx, some of the other tools, that is smart enough to understand who you are, excuse me, and then take the rest of what's around you and put an image up there. And you can choose an image that you wanted to put behind you. And you could put some playful images and things like that, but you probably don't want to do this for your presentation. So choose, if you're going to choose a background, choose a tasteful background, or maybe one your organization wants you to use. When you use a virtual background, there's a couple things you need to remember. The colors that you wear here have to be different than the colors in your real background. So if I was wearing a dark brown shirt, the computer wouldn't be able to tell between my shirt and this bookcase. So make sure you wear colors that distinguish you from the background. And I like to choose solid colors because stripes tend to get a little wavy in front of the cameras. And if you use a lot of bright colors, then there's a greater chance the virtual background is going to confuse you with the wall and start just messing around with your virtual background. If you're going to do the virtual background, just dress straightforward. One of the virtual backgrounds that I use at work that I like quite a bit from Microsoft Teams, it's called Blur. And so it doesn't project an image, it takes the existing background and blurs it. And you might practice with that one if you're using Teams for your conferencing. I find it very useful. So pick a good background, choose a virtual background, and look at Blur if you're using Teams. One last thing that I wanted to cover on this is when you use a virtual background and your hands are out of the shot, especially when I'm sitting, if you're using your virtual background and all of a sudden your hand comes up, the computer's going to be a little slow to recognize that right away. So that's why I also prefer a real background to a virtual one when I am being expressive and moving my hands. As far as lighting goes, you should definitely have the lighting above you, either even with you or behind you if you can. You can see my shadows over here. And make sure you have sufficient light. If I was shooting in this room during the daytime, my shutters here would have light streaming in and it would really destroy half the picture. If I did that, I'd have to take the camera and move it over here to shoot from here. And you'll know that because you're practicing, right? Did I mention practice? I think I did. Next, sound. You have a couple different options when it comes to sound. Your computer has a microphone on it, and it's also got a speaker on it. And one of the reasons why I advise you not use that computer speaker microphone combination is because it does create that possibility for the feedback loop of sound. To combat that, I purchased one of these handy plug-in microphones, and I think this cost $6. And it worked okay for me. The microphone picked up my voice a lot better, but I also had speakers positioned behind it, so I still got a little bit of feedback coming from this. So I moved away from that. My second option, and this is the one that I highly recommend for you, especially when you're sitting, is to use an over-ear headphone with a boom microphone. Now this boom microphone is set up so it's only picking up noises that are right in front of it. So my mouth will be right in front of the microphone when I have it on. And the over-ear headphones will drown out any noise that occurs around the house that are either distractions or just takeaways from my experience of the conference. You'll see for the next segment when I come in here, I'll be using this microphone and it produces great audio. You can use Bluetooth headsets as well. You can plug in a Bluetooth and connect to your computer and do that. But Bluetooth is not super 100% reliable. So if you're going to use your Bluetooth, run through a recording session, try it, and come back and see how you sound. And then what I'm using right now is actually the microphone that's on my webcam. So you're getting the audio directly from my webcam. Finally, staging. I chose to stand in front of you for this segment because it gives me a range of motion and the ability to move my arms and legs and talk to you a little bit about things like the background and lighting, which are important. But for a presenting perspective, this is the most powerful way to do it. I can have emphasis, I can reinforce things with my emotions, and so standing is a powerful way to deliver a message. But it's not going to work if I'm having to lean forward and change slides or anything like that. So sitting is a good option as well. The rest of the segment I'll be sitting because I'm going to be running my slideshow or moving through Zoom at the same time. But one hint here is whenever you're presenting, if you're going to use notes, we're going to suggest that you keep your notes in front of you. I'll talk about your notes a little bit later, how you should prepare them, but the notes should be here. I could have chosen to have my notes here. This would have meant I'm looking away rather than looking towards you. My notes are right below you, so even when I do look for them to see what it says to do next, I'm not looking that far away and I'm not breaking too much eye contact. You're probably noticing already how much eye contact is important in a webinar because as I speak, if I'm not looking at you, I don't seem like I'm connecting to you, and this whole thing is about connecting. Now, our next segment, we'll talk about the tools in Zoom, but as far as the webinar tools, so far we've talked about getting some help, making sure you have good internet, having good light, having good sound, what to do with backgrounds, and whether you stand or sit during your presentation. Try a couple different ways and see how they work and choose what's best for you.
Hello, everyone. In our last section, I talked to you about the setting up your web-hosted meeting. And we talked about your lighting, your stage, your sound, but I didn't really cover the tools that are available to you. So I'm going to go over a couple of them from at least a Zoom perspective. So if you were running a Zoom session, you'll see different options along the bottom of your screen. Now, I can't show you those options from my screen, but what I can do is share a screenshot I took of this screen, if I can find it. And it's really a horrible picture of me. I was looking down when I took it. But we can see the different options. First of all, you should see the mute button on your left, and then whether you're sharing your video, yes or no. And these little up carrots allow you to choose different options for those. You know, I've switched between different audio during the day, so I've had to set my different mute sessions. The participants button that shows towards the middle will be used by you, the host, and if you have a co-host, you can see who's on the call. And one of the most valuable features here is if someone's making a lot of noise, if you have that host window open, you'll see noise coming through their virtual speaker there on the board, and you'll be able to mute them. So this is the way the co-host would get rid of that extraneous noise you don't want in a meeting. Skipping over polls for a second, we'll go to chat. You can click on chat and have conversations with everybody who's in the meeting, or you can pick one person and send a message. I want you to be very careful with that individual message send, because if you get a message from someone and start typing, it will send it back to just them. But if you get a message from someone and then someone else sends you a message, you might think you're responding to person A and you're responding to person B. And I just want you to think and look before you click on who you send a message to. Right? We've done the share screen. I've shown you that. Next is record. I've told you to practice, and I hope you are practicing. You can use Zoom, the Zoom free account, to record and see your messages. If you have the paid Zoom account, you can store them on the cloud, or if you're a non-paid account, you can just store them locally on your computer. The last button on the right here is reactions. This is something you can use with your audience, get them engaged a little bit. We talked about asking rhetorical questions. Reactions is a way to have them click and give responses, whether a thumbs up or clapping or things like that. So you can play around with the clapping reactions. And when they do that, you'll see next to their picture on the screen, it'll show the thumbs up or the clapping. Now, we're going to talk about polling. I'm going to stop sharing this screen. And I'm going to click on polling. And it brings up a screen, and I'm going to click edit to edit the poll, which brings me to a website. Now I can share the Zoom meeting screen, and you can see what I'm going through with the Zoom meeting polls. All right, I'm going to close that. I'm going to add a poll and ask some questions. Have you ever created and many of these you can set in advance and launch when the time comes. So this will be a simple yes or no. You can go over here and change the order, drag no above yes. You could set up different types of polls, single choice or multiple choice. And you could just copy these questions and create a number of questions. So I am going to save this. And then here's all of my polls. I've only created one for this account. It's the poll one. I think that's as much as I can demonstrate. So I'm going to stop the share here. Now when I click on polls in Zoom, it's going to show me the question, and I can click launch polling. Have you ever created a Zoom meeting? And you can click yes or no. And it gives me a timer, and you can say to people you have a minute. And then when you're done, you can end the polling, and you can share the results real time, or you can save them and hold them till later. We do this to vote on things in our Toastmasters meeting and then show the results later. So that roughly covers the different buttons, the participants' chat, reactions, and polls in Zoom meetings. Okay, in this segment, we're going to talk about a PowerPoint presentation. It's my understanding that you're going to be putting together and giving a PowerPoint presentation. Now, doing that takes some planning and preparation. I want to start off with organizing your message. We want to be able to say what you're here to say in as simple and effective a manner as possible. By thinking about what your message is, composing that in, again, we'll go with bullet points, and then translating that into slides, you will convey your message as clearly as possible. Avoid tangents and look at your presentation and ask yourself, is there anything that's not on point on the presentation? If it's not, what message does it serve? That's the basic organization. And then I'm going to pull up a presentation here. Let's see. I will start by sharing my screen. And I will go over here to my other monitor and launch my slideshow. So let me talk about a couple things there. I'll go back. Start here. My slideshow presentation is here in the various slides, and I've got it off to a side monitor. When I am ready to present, I've tested and configured this to make sure that what I present will show in this other screen. And here's my notes for the whole talk. And when I go over to PowerPoint and press F5, it moves the presentation here. It also puts the current slide up on my left and the slide preview of what's next to it. And this is really great if this is a projector and that slide's going up on the screen. It's a little bit different, works a little bit differently when you are doing this via a webinar. So again, practice, give it a try. Now, a couple of things here. Look at the colors, very basic. Not a lot going on, some clear fonts, and some clearly defined colors. Now, it's really tempting to go and do a lot with your slideshow, and we'll talk about how you do some things, but I also want to caution you against doing too much. We recently had a presentation where someone spent hours putting together a slide presentation with a lot of different dazzling effects from slide to slide and within slides, and we took out most of it because in particular in Zoom or any web thing, it doesn't work as well. So one of those first things that I'm going to talk about is what's called the PowerPoint transition, and I'm going to demonstrate it here. Wow, that was a great transition, wasn't it? I don't know if you saw the same thing I did, but in about a second and a half, this Zoom thing happened and this great, everything blew up and it came back and it said something different. Don't do that in a Zoom call, because the person on the receiving end may not have that high-speed internet and get the fastest transition occurring, and it will completely take away from what you're trying to do if they're seconds behind in getting to see your slide build to the next frame, what you're trying for. So very much use straight transitions. Avoid that one. Now I'm going to use something else called animation in just a minute, and I do support some animation. But we're back to simplified, slide to slide, and then basic animation if you're going to use any at all. So here's an animation slide. We're going to talk about organizing your message. Now, the fundamental for giving a slide presentation is to talk about what you want to talk about. The items that appear on your screen should only be reinforcements. It's important to remember that if a person is reading what's on the slide, they're not listening to you. They're reading what's on the slide. So those items, those few items that you want to put on the slide should illustrate those things you've said. They should not be all of the facts. And if you have all the facts on the slide, you're going to turn around and read them anyhow. And that is not really good for retention. If you have a fact sheet you want to provide, keep it separate. Just have the bullet points here. Now, I do have animation here, so as I click, I'll bring out my message. And how are we going to present? We're going to start by saying why we're here. What's our statement of purpose? Then you're going to give them the facts you want to present. The opening is the first part. The body comes next. And then you're going to summarize and make sure that people are focused on the key takeaways that you have. Right? So boom, boom, boom. One click for each. And notice that the background is clean and easy. And as I bring up these highlight points, I'm staying consistent with the coloring that's in there. I also made sure that I picked an effective contrast by using white against the red background so things could be clearly done. Right? A simple, legible font. I got a great piece of advice from a fellow Toastmaster, Tom Ostott. When you look at the fonts that you use in your presentation, you'll see there's like serif font, but there's also a sans serif fonts. The sans fonts are always a little bit more crisp, and they make for a much better presentation, and they'll just jump off the background a lot more cleanly. And once again, we're using basic colors. There's nothing contrasting here, and it's very positive. So that's some different ideas. Now, let's talk a bit about how you execute that. I'm going to get out of my slideshow and move over here and bring you the PowerPoint. Right? And if we look at this slide, if I click on animations, I'm going to see that there's an animation for each one of these bullets. And all you have to do is select the area that you want and put an animation in. Once again, I have many choices here of the different animations I could have, and I've taken the very easiest one there is. The only other exception, possible one, is the none, but appear is the simplest of the entrances. So this is how I did that click, click, click to bring out the different points. One of the great benefits of doing it that way when you present is that you keep people from reading ahead or thinking ahead on your points. Right? Now, I will demonstrate another problem. Here's all my bad effects. When you do this animation type build, you have to remember exactly where you are and how many bullet points you have. Because if I click too far here, I go to the next slide, it's not always good to come back to the slide. In this case, it built it back. That was actually unexpected. Sometimes it starts with just slide without any of the animations built in. All right. The other thing you want to do, this is my statement, my slide on how you're to present. You should make sure that you're presenting one idea per slide. Right? Don't mix your messages in the slide. Don't try to talk about one benefit and then another in the same slide. If you're talking about one plan versus another, that's one thing, but don't start mixing apples and oranges in a single slide. Keep on that point. Okay? The next thing I want to talk about is how images can help make your point. All right. I have an example here I just pulled up facts on African hunger. And I've got 3 bullet points here that talk about roughly half the population of southern Sudan is without enough food. Nearly 1 million children under the age of 5 are actually acutely malnourished. In Somalia, 2001, drought and famine in Somalia killed more than 125,000 children, and on. I could make these points to you in this presentation, but honestly, as I start to give you this information, your mind's just going to click over to, okay, I got it. I understand that it's a dire situation and that something needs to be done. So what can you do more effectively than that? How about summarizing those points that I just said and give it to a person in a way that they'll remember it, right? So there's nothing quite like a visual for doing this, all right? And my camera picture is up on top of that. Let me see if I can drag it down. So a summary point, according to UNICEF, between 2018, the number of stunted children, along with an image. And I'm sorry that I presented this, but I'm trying to make a stark point. One image will create a very lasting impression. And when the slide is up, if you want to read your 3 factual points that you had on the previous slide, then you're having the person who's watching emoting with it. They're feeling the slide. You're giving them the facts that support everything that's on this slide. All right, so there's just a couple different things that you can do with the slide presentation. Let me stop sharing. All right, so remember, set up your screen beforehand. Practice. I keep saying it time and time and time again. Keep each slide on the point you want to make in the slide. When you've done your presentation, drafted it out, looked it back, look at each slide and says, does that make a single point or is that making multiple points? Right? If it's making multiple points, look at splitting it into separate slides. Keep your colors simple. Don't get too fancy with any of that. Don't start mixing fonts and colors on slides. It's a really easy mistake to make, to put a lot of different colors and zing in there, and use images to state the emotion of your message, and then use the facts that you have to back that up in your spoken word. Don't read what's on the slide presentation. Talk about what the message that's showing in that picture of the slide conveys, and give a very clear case to support those items that are on the slide. In our next segment, we'll go over speaking tips, what to do and what not to do, but this concludes talking about how we do PowerPoints. Okay, our next segment will be talking about how you appear on camera from a speaking style perspective. This is an area that we spend a lot of time in Toastmasters. And you know what? How we do it the most often, we do it by practicing. Getting up there and trying it a couple different times is the most effective way to get this done. So when you do this, record yourself. Give yourself some time to do that. And look at yourself. If you don't want to do it this way, speak to yourself in the mirror. Speaking to yourself in the mirror is a great way to practice different presentations and speeches. But given the fact that we're going to be doing audiobooks, webinars, pardon me, giving it in front of the camera is going to be just as effective, and you also see how you come across. The other thing, you might have noticed more than once that I have demonstrated my next point. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. You're going to be speaking for a while, and perfection shouldn't be your goal. I was doing a video of this. I could have stopped and retook a number of times, and in fact I did, but what you saw still had some errors in it. It's okay. We're human. You want to come across to your audience that you're human. Not only that, but here's a really key point. You want to come across to the audience that you're trying to help them get the information they need. That's the reason you're up there. So before you start, think about that. What's your end goal? To convey the information to the audience so they're understanding and able to make a good choice. You're in a position in doing this presentation that you can speak confidently about what you're presenting because it's in the interest of your audience that they receive it, they know it, and they make the best choice for them. Now that's a little pressure on you, so make sure when you go back and look at your presentations that you are achieving everything that you're doing. Make sure that you modulate your voice. Modulate meanings, change volume, change speed, change inflection from time to time. Make stronger points. Avoid dropping off, which can often happen if you look away. Now, nice thing about the boom microphone is I can't really look away from the microphone, but if you're speaking to a camera that's up here, it's very easy for it to happen. Watch those drop-offs, and because people perceive dropped-off voices as loss of confidence. If you're trying to make a point and your voice starts running out at the end, it's going to sound like you don't believe what you're saying. If you find yourself doing that, stop. Take the deep breath and finish your point. Remember that those pauses are powerful, that they can really set where you're going to go from a point of view. They're going to make people stop their little distractions they have and look to see why you stopped so you can make your point. Also, how do you keep your audience engaged through all of this? I know you're going to develop fantastic content in fantastic presentations after all I've shown you, but still you're dealing with an audience that they're going to have to be drawn in and maintain focus on the message you're given. So some keys to doing that: as you give your presentation, ask questions of the audience. And you can ask rhetorical questions of them that don't necessarily require an answer, but I want you to be careful about that. Because if you ask a question where you know everybody is going to be giving the same answer, it's not really a question. It's just some filler. And people will see right through that. So if you're going to ask rhetorical questions, ask them in such a way that it engages people's thought to say, well, how do I feel about that? Or cause to make the point. Can you really afford to come out of the end of this presentation and not have a choice about what you want to do for healthcare? That would be a rhetorical question that might focus a person on why they should pay attention. The second type of question that you want to ask them is definitely one for information. And given that you're doing a live webinar, you can actually call for questions and answers, or you can have people chat in their different questions. We also haven't covered polls yet. We'll get into that in the last segment is a couple different final options, and Zoom polls will be one of those. And then finally, be conversational. Be yourself. Be out there as far as your speaking style. And just talk as you would normally talk. Like we've said already, avoid that reading nature and be yourself to a person. So use your different voice, that inflection that you're having when you're making a point. Use hands in motion. I just looked at myself over on the side screen. Did you see that? To make sure that those hand motions are in. This goes back to what I was talking about, the stage. When I was standing back there, I could go like this with my arms and make points, and I could move from side to side. Here, when I'm tighter in on camera, I'm very much limited to what I do, and my hands play much less of a presence. So I have to keep my hand motions tight and in control. Keep your content light, right? Don't get so drawn down into what's going on. You can use a little humor, you could use a little side story or whatever, just to keep things interesting as you go. And keep moving around. I just looked at myself moving around again. But keep yourself in motion. If you're the only thing on camera, even if you're over to the side of the presentation, you moving creates an energy. Keep that energy up through your presentation. So we want to talk about changing our voice, modulating it, moving it around. Pause when you make points. Remember where the camera is when you're speaking. Be sincere. Most of all, be sincere in what you're doing. Keep people engaged through questions. And if you can mix things up between facts, maybe some light facts that you can have in between your different slides, maybe talk about a little joke about your experience with Zoom or some bad experiences with Zoom, just to keep people engaged. You'll keep it light, keep it moving, keep your audience tuned into what you're saying.